What's going on, everyone? Welcome to another episode of the MPower Show, and I am Markeith Brayton and my co-host.
Donzale Powell.
And we're so excited to be with you again this week with another episode. We're in a brand new year, and this is actually the fourth week of the month. And Donzale and I had been having conversation around doing health-related episodes each fourth week of the month. And what better way to start the year off than with a mental health conversation? Because, we talk about physical health and we talk about nutrition and we talk about a lot of things, but the foundation of all of that, I personally believe, is our mental health. But specifically, we're going to be talking about how childhood trauma can impact your life as an adult. And we have a great guest who's going to be sharing with us his expertise around this particular topic. But before we get into that, Donzale, how was your week?
My week it's been good so far. Good so far. Can't complain at all.
Can't complain. Yeah, I have been busy, just kind of still creating my goals for the business and trying to, create this map for myself for the rest of 2023 so that I can just continue to hit the ground running. So it's been a decent week. The past few days, I've been a little sleepy. I don't know if it's the cold weather and not wanting to get out of bed, but yeah, I've been feeling a little sleepy here lately.
Yeah, you got to remember we've kicked into several weeks of not having as much vitamin D too. So it eventually does wear on us, typically a little bit more than others. So
yeah, this is true. It has been kind of cloudy, not much sun going on here in Nashville. Maybe where you are, there's plenty of sun and it's a little bit warmer, but where we are, it's not been a whole lot of sun. Yep. Well, we're going to go ahead and hop into today's topic on how childhood trauma can impact you as an adult and potentially keep you from thriving in your life. My guest today our guest today is Mr. Cory George, trauma expert. Cory is a nationally recognized trauma expert, highly revered life coach, speaker, author, television personality, and multimedia producer. His work can be seen on A&E's new original series, Digital Addiction, whereby he serves as an interventionist. Look at me saying them big words, intervention. He has risen above his own painful outcomes of childhood trauma, including rape and molestation, bullying, abandonment, and physical abuse, to become a passionate and dedicated practitioner working with individuals and families. George is also an award-winning television talk show host who has committed his life to the ministry of mental health. So we're going to go ahead and bring in our guest, Mr. Cory George. What's going on, Cory?
Hey. I don't know why
we want to thank you for joining us for this first episode of the year on mental health and dealing with our health. So we appreciate you being here.
Well, thank you. As long as I have time and breath in my body to talk about this and any of the smaller subjects under this window of trauma and how it shows up, I'm here for it.
Awesome. Well, we always introduce our guests based on the bio they send, but I always like to give you a little bit more opportunity to share more about yourself. So take it away.
Oh, yeah. So like I said, like the last line said, that this work is my ministry. I try to lead the life I want you guys to lead. Because I don't know if you've ever had an example of what I'm trying to tell you about, right? So I need to be that. But I also want to be able to say that my space occupied in this world had an intentional positive effect on other spaces. I don't like horror movies, so if you want to see the real little kid scream, just put me in front of anything horror or anything blood and gore. So no, it doesn't go with me. I love people. I am optimistic for everybody. And I always tell people I've never met anybody whose story didn't matter. So if I can teach you that your story is okay, Then that's my job. I'm highly comical. Off the, there's a balance in life, right? So I can be very serious about this, and then I'll throw in some comedy as I'm talking about it, because I kind of like to make sure that we understand that life is not always about, planning and being serious and dropping science. It's also about interweaving emotions and managing those emotions, so you can have a serious conversation that doesn't leave you exhausted and tired. It can
Yeah.
leave you feeling learned, as they say in the South, and fulfilled, and happy that the conversation went well, even though there's deep content. I'm the father of two, 16, no, well, almost 16, almost 18, and as I told you, Markeith, I have a trans daughter. My son is on the autism spectrum and has ADHD. So when I say this ministry is my life, it started way before you guys ever saw me do this. So I just transferred my lifestyle into the passion of my work, and I'm the oldest of seven kids, and I'm from Louisiana. So you may hear me throw in an accent. It just happens, especially if there's alcohol involved. So I think that's a good start.
That's a good start. Good start. Well, as I stated, thank you for joining us to have this conversation. I know it's not necessarily a conversation that we thought we probably would have had on the show, but I think that one of the things with this show is that I want us to be able to tackle a diverse set of topics,
Mhm.
and not just the normal things, because there's so many things that impact us.
Yeah.
Listening to the news here lately of all of the gun shootings and mass shootings and different things that are happening in the world. And when I think about that, I said it has to be trauma related. It has to be things that are going on in people's mindsets that are causing them to have these episodes of doing the things that they're doing.
Mhm.
And I'm reminded of coaching that I've gotten over the years, and then one particular coach who always shares at her conferences that many of us as adults are simply 7-year olds living as 40-year olds. And I never really fully understood it until sometimes I think about certain reactions that I have to certain things. And I'm like, why do I still have this particular reaction? Or why do I respond in this way when I hear certain things? And I'm like, you know what? That's probably that 7, 8, 9-year old situation that maybe I'm not necessarily dealt with. So why trauma? Why trauma expert? Why this particular ministry?
For everything you said, and you and I talked deeply about this last night. So I wanted to save some of the aha moments for today. But being raised by a dad that if I had known of his trauma that he had gone through, I would understand why the way he fathered me was not personal. Why me feeling like he didn't like me was not personal. He had a cap. He only had so much he could offer. So when you don't heal, you shrink your capacity for empathy and compassion. You shorten your capacity for the myriad of ways that you can respond. So you have a limited set of responses because your capacity is limited. And most times it's not because you plan to do that. But I kind of say it like this: if you learn to expect failure,
Mm.
you will lower your expectations. So that way
Mm.
failure doesn't hurt like it used to hurt, right? Or if you use uncertainty, you will learn to not expect anything and be so surprised that you got something. And so that's how you shape these expectations, and that's how it limits you because you had to cope.
Mm.
So sometimes in the efforts of coping, first we limit ourselves and then we have to open up again. So, but then some of us get stuck in the coping and we get stuck in the limitation. So we never get above that. And and for that issue in your life, you are always in survival mode for that sector of your life.
Wow.
If that's how you respond with a limited set of options because your coping shrunk that possibility for you, just in that area, because you can thrive in other areas, but in that area, you always are in survival mode. And the best thing that you're trying to do is just to get past the issue. You're not
Hmm.
trying to find a big big moment. You just want to get past it because it's shocking. And I want to dive into what you were talking about. Being a 7 or 8 year old in a 40-year-old body, and I kind of went into detail about how a traumatic memory works to seal you up at a certain age emotionally. Because the way things become a traumatic experience is your mind, it takes a snapshot of everything that happened, right? and the way the memory works. So your memory is supposed to file away. It's supposed to file away, and then it becomes a system based on time. So you will pull out a memory for knowledge and say, "Oh, I've been through this already, so this is how I solved it the last time." So it becomes a lesson learned. But
Mm-hmm.
unfortunately, in trauma, it doesn't get filed away. Then it becomes a barricade. It literally becomes that file that you can't close in the file cabinet. That's that one that's sticking out. That's because it never. That's because it was never processed, and so it sticks out randomly. So there's no way to pull from it and make it a pleasant thing because in your mind it's not pleasant. So your mind is triggered randomly by events that remind you of that. And so when you have a traumatic memory, it's not just the memory of what happened. It's the feelings of how you felt and how you dealt with it in that time. So if you had a startle reaction, if you passed out, if you froze, if you screamed loudly, and I want you to hold on to all these examples because I will talk about the example I gave you last night. Hold on to all of that. So you can also so it's what you see, is what you feel, is what you hear, and it's also what you did. But most importantly, it's what you smell. So many people don't realize the only sense of yours that is directly wired towards your brain is your sense of smell.
Mm.
Everything else has something between it. So your sense of smell is the most powerful sense you have in terms of memories. It is
Mm.
a it's the most powerful one. That's why you may smell something. You're like, wait a minute, this, it could be comfort. So you smell, a scent that may remind you of grandma's house during Thanksgiving. That should be, pleasant. But like me, what if it reminded me of the first night I got raped because I can smell his cologne? So you
Mm.
see how it can have an adverse effect?
Yeah.
But that's because these things are so subtly recorded. So every time you're triggered, because you and I talked last night, a trigger is a reminder, either subtle or strong, of a past event attached with past feelings. So when you're triggered, and so let's say you had an ex, right? And your ex did something, and so you meet someone new, and they remind you of that ex in some kind of way. You're gonna feel the same way that you did when your ex did A, B, and C, even though you have no proof that the person's doing it, just that the trigger also pulls up all the reactions and all those sensory things, right? So just imagine a 40-year-old person, as your coach said, who had a past trauma. And they're speaking and they're so strong and so bold and they're speaking on stage, and then something in that room reminds them of something they hadn't worked on. You see him or her fall down and they're screaming and they're in a fetal position. At 40, you would think that's unreasonable, right? But
Right.
in the work that I do, like I told you, I'd find out the story and say, no, it's actually reasonable because what he's experiencing is a flashback. And when your flashback takes you, that's why it's called a flashback. It's a flash backwards. So in that moment, he's 8 years old. So only his body has matured. But until that trigger actually subsides, he is going to think, act, sound, and do everything that he did, or mostly those reactions from when it happened. So
Mm.
if you're 15, it really is about time.
Wow.
So that memory is stuck in time. It's a time capsule until you walk through it. And there's various ways we do that as we help clients. But once you realize, that you are safer than you know, because with trauma, it it basically hijacks the brain and says, if I think I'm in danger, I'm going to respond like I'm in danger, which means that the whole cascade of processes that happens in the brain when a trauma reaction happens is going to happen whether the brain thinks it's in danger or it is in danger, because the brain can't tell the difference. So once we help you with the trigger and we help you walk through that trauma and file that file away, you will realize that you're safer than you thought. So a lot of those reactions are going to go away. And it becomes an experience where you now can gain the wisdom from it because you filed it away.
So good. Tanzale.
Yeah, so I just wanted to see if we can take a quick step back.
Okay.
For one, I just want to be clear because a lot of words are used, very often now. So
Mm-hmm.
when we say trauma, if you can, I don't know if you need to define that, but tell me
I
what
should.
is the difference
Oh,
between trauma and just something bad that happened? How do I distinguish that, for myself?
trauma is really it's really an emotional. It's a highly volatile emotional reaction to a life event that can be bad. So trauma and bad can be, well, they can be the same. Now that doesn't mean that everybody will experience it as trauma, though. So now I want to address when people say, well, we all experience trauma. That's not true. Some people may never experience what they consider a traumatic event, so hopefully they won't. But again, even then, if you experience one, so the body tries to metabolize that stuff on its own. So a lot of people don't end up with the stress disorders such as anxiety and depression, and you may not have things such as post traumatic stress disorder. So trauma itself is traumatic in the moment, but you may sleep it off the next day and say, "Hey, I'm fine." But also, let's also look at the cultural aspect and the environmental aspect. If you raise in a neighborhood where gang violence is done often, and you're hearing gunshots often, and you're in an environment that's often volatile, what you may consider more traumatic has to be more extreme though,
Right.
because all your life you've had to normalize your environment, so you don't see anything wrong with the daily stuff. So unless a building is blown up or there's a huge attack, you won't flinch. But take a person from the suburbs who has never been exposed to that in terms of long enough exposure for them to find it the least acceptable, they will probably be highly traumatized in your neighborhood.
Makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah.
So as we discuss this, idea of trauma, what would be the first thing that a person would need to pay attention to say, okay, this trauma potentially is creeping up or it is holding me back?
Well, I think first of all, when we look at the reactions, even when it happens, self monitor your reactions. You may find yourself easily agitated now. You're highly sensitive
Mhm.
emotionally because it's jarring, or you may find yourself totally shut down, totally like, nope, I'm not gonna. Because if that's your coping mechanism, that freeze thing or run, you may run from the idea that something's wrong, especially if you're in a household or an environment that, like for men, if they train them in to act a certain way, they may shut down. You want to look at, are you having new aches and pains? Are you having gut pains you can't explain
Mm.
from an illness? That can all be related to trauma. If you're having an issue conceiving a child and you're under an inordinate amount of stress, when your body's in fight or flight mode, it shuts down that system anyway. So if you're in
Mm.
constant stress, male and female, you may be hampering your chances at making that first, second, third, or fourth child. You know, women may also have an issue because when they lack estrogen, it does other things towards the body because estrogen is also a it's also a, it's also a protective hormone. So that, if stress is blocking your brain from telling your brain to make it and to also release it, you're going to, but as a woman, but you may suffer damage. So that's why knowing and understanding what those feelings are, and these symptoms, they can happen either when you first experience trauma, or the whole life cycle of you holding in the trauma because you learn to cope with it. So you may have those same feelings.
Wow.
Mm.
So
It's
when
a
we
lot to
think,
pay
go
attention
ahead,
to.
Donzale.
I was just gonna say it's a lot to pay attention to. Paying attention to what you're thinking, how you're feeling, what your body's doing is important.
But I
Mm.
also want to say, also monitor the quality of your relationships. Have
Mm.
they changed? Are
Hmm.
you making relationships because they feel safe? Not necessarily because you like the people, but because they make you feel safe. Does your world have to do with things that are only safe? Are you taking less risks? Are the things you're enjoying more hazardous, or are they safer? So for example, some people deal with trauma or deal with psychological issues or burdens by alcohol, drinking, sex, gambling, shopping online. So when you find yourself having these symptoms or these things happen, trace back the root. My family had experiences where they drank a lot,
Mm.
and then when I look back at the history, because I like doing that, we were experiencing a lot of trauma in the Deep South as a black family, as a poor black family. So there are so many things that we have to look at, but just look at the quality of your life.
Yeah,
You
just
know,
hear you say that though. I grew up in a single parent home, and so my mother's side of the family, there really were no vices. I didn't grow up around any vices. Nobody smoked, nobody drank, you know. they
Hmm.
worked. I mean, maybe that was their vice because everybody in my family, every female in my family, was just a hard-working woman, and believed in that. But on my father's side of the family, my father was an alcoholic. And you're making me think of whether or not my not partaking in drinking is a byproduct of trauma. And I say this because there were times when my mother would have me to go stay with him, and every time he was drunk. And I remember a time where he and his girlfriend at the time got into a huge argument that
Hmm.
ended up into being a fight, and he was drunk. And so I wonder whether or not that really impacted me enough to where I pretty much don't drink a thing.
Let me help you to stop wondering. Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely, big fat 100%. And I usually tell my clients, and this is what I believe, and you can look this up. So if you associate an event or a happening in your life either with extreme good or extreme not so good, you will rarely find people straddling the middle. Like you would not be a halfway drinker. You're going to either be all in,
Mm.
because you could easily say, "Well, that's what I saw," you know, or you could be all out because that's what I saw because I didn't like the consequences of what I saw. Also, your dad being drunk, seeing you. What did that make you feel about his attention towards you while he was drunk? He
Mm.
couldn't really be as effective. So perhaps you adopted this mentality: is I have to be effective, so I need to be clear. So
And
you would,
granted, that was
yeah,
only maybe literally probably I could count on one hand how many times my mom allowed me to even go.
yeah, but that's
So just
yeah,
in those
yeah,
few times pretty much
that's all.
impacted me.
Yeah, because you're probably in the stage of development where you're learning and shaping your idea. In your head, dad means something. You know,
Mm.
when you grow up, dad means something. Dad is a figurehead. And this is the figurehead that you got me looking up to. I don't want to be anything like him. You know how many clients I have that I'm trying to teach them not to work so hard to not be their parents, but be their authentic self?
Mm.
You know, because they're trying so hard not to be somebody that they don't know who they are. You know, it takes a lot of energy to purposely not be somebody else, but it takes the energy away from you being your authentic self, which is probably fine. But they're scared of even the possibility of emulating anything like that because that's my dad and I got his blood, so maybe I'm going to be him. No.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
yeah, so, but that's partly a good way of how you use your experiences, right? Because the bad way or the not so great way would be, well, I'm going to drink anyway
Yeah.
because my dad did it. So you made a decision to use that experience and gain the wisdom as we saw because you processed it and you gained the wisdom and said, I can't go down that road.
Yeah. And it
Yeah.
ultimately ended up being his demise as well. He died maybe about 6 years ago of liver cancer. He's ultimately stopped, but at this point, it
Yeah.
had
It was way too.
already too late. And I ended up being his power of attorney and, having to do all the end of life things. And it was just an interesting situation. And so
Yeah.
people always ask me, I'm like, you don't drink at all? And I'm like, no, because, and they don't ever ask me why or give them a background story of why,
Hmm.
but that is the primary reason why for
Yeah.
me.
You know, and like I said, we all have it. We all have these experiences.
Mhm.
At some point, psychologically, we make decisions on how they show up. And when you talk about how not even just trauma, but past issues with attachments, you know, issues with siblings, unresolved issues with family, unresolved issues with bullying, you know, things that affect your developmental stage, how they show up in your adult relationships with other people and with yourself.
Yeah.
That's the barometer is how do you relate to yourself? Are you comfortable just showing me you? If not, then we have an issue. Um, why do you pick the people you pick in your life?
Mhm.
I want to talk about the term that we use, which is trauma repetition. Sometimes we will recreate the traumatic experience because that's the thing we've learned to cope with. That's the thing we learn
Mm.
most. You can look at it with a domestic violence victim. So whether it's man or woman, if you spent years coping with that type of violence, you have a whole chest full, like a whole plate full of things that you do now to just to make sure that you don't get hit. You know? But it didn't turn on to say, even though I want better, I have to let go. I have to loose all the things that I accommodated in the trauma. So what we see happening, with some victims is they'll find somebody else. They'll either do two things, and this is the part that scares me for people the most. The first thing is they will find somebody that's like the other person because again, they've been doing that for years. That's their role. That's their dance. They want better, but without counseling or processing that, it'll be a hard run. Or and I've done this after my trauma. But this person ain't that bad. I mean, if I can deal with that old trauma, that thing which is worse, I know I can do this.
Mm.
But all of it was bad. If I have to say, well, it's not as bad as soon as you have to say that about anything, anybody, any job, any lover, any friend, even any child, it is that bad. So none of it was good. So I had to learn that none of it was good. Even the minimal amount of abuse or the minimal amount of hurt was not good. So we believe that because we've gone through the worst, we can take the not so bad. But then you're back in the cycle of accepting different forms of abuse. And this is why sometimes when you look at studies, people who have gone through trauma and not processed it fully are several times likely to experience trauma uh, throughout their lifetime until they seal that hole.
Wow.
Yeah.
Mm. Well, this has been deep first half.
I told you. I told you last night.
And so what we're going to do is we're going to take a quick commercial break and we'll come back. And then, as it's the preacher in me, we've gone deep around what trauma is and how to identify it and its impact on us. But Cory's also going to give us how do we really come out of it successfully and deal with it in a more healthy way that will help us to thrive. So we'll be right back after this.
So with Donzela's Photography, we specialize in helping you bring out you. One thing that I've noticed, people can be scared, intimidated about doing a shoot, especially if it's the first time. I've modeled before, done acting, the whole nine. So if you need help with that, I'm gonna coach you through the whole thing. I'm gonna tell you how to pose, make you look real cute. And then by the time you get your images, you're gonna look back and you're gonna be like, that was me, I did that. So I love doing that for people. I love bringing out you. So just make sure that you check us out. We'd be happy to work with you.
All right, welcome back as we continue our conversation around how childhood trauma can impact you as an adult. And Mr. George has been giving us some insight around how it impacts us, how it can affect us, and things that we need to pay attention to as we go throughout our lives and repetitive things that may come up. But now we want to kind of shift in these last few minutes on, how do we really successfully deal with our childhood trauma and move into that space where I don't know if we overcome it, we conquer it. I don't know what the word is. So what do we do? Do we conquer it? Do we overcome it? Or do we learn to live with it? Mr. George, give us the answer.
Well, I think overcoming and conquering can mean one or more things. So you can conquer something by managing it, right?
Okay.
There are certain things for me, like even although I'm on a lifetime healing journey from my childhood rape and abuse, I don't have the triggers I used to have.
Mm.
If I do, you'll never notice because they resolve quickly. So it's not a matter of nothing affects me. How does it affect me? What's the duration and what's the intensity? Am I, having the seizure? Am I, shaking and sweating? No, I'm just like, okay, that was a trigger. All right, it's okay. I'm safe in this moment. So part of this is learning how to tell yourself you're safe in that moment. Because when you're triggered, there's an unsafety, whether it's physical unsafety or there's some type of emotional unsafety. So my idea of this is being willing to look for your best self at all times. So when you're really looking at the greater part of yourself, because trauma or psychological issues that you don't want to face will have you saying to yourself and people, this is just how I am. So you defeated your whole purpose right there of living, which is growing. So you stop growing in a certain area because you choose that this is how I am. And some people do that because they are scared of facing that trauma. They are scared of going to a therapist and thinking, if I say this, I'm going to explode. Yeah, you probably will, but you're going to be in safe hands though. So people like me and other counselors, therapists, or mental health practitioners, we're trained to help you contain that if you can't do it on your own. You know, people worried about, they worry about judgment. I'm trained not to judge. So it's, but that's an internal projection because they're judging themselves, right? Because you and I talked about projection last night. Is that there's a world built around the issue, and I kind of liken it to if the issue is in the middle of the paper, you're going to draw circles around it, but you'll never walk through that paper. You will never walk through the centers of those papers. That's you forming a life around that's you forming a life around a callus. Literally, the callus in the middle is always going to stick out and hurt somewhere. But sometimes you got to walk through that dot in the middle and kind of let yourself feel it, because usually it's about avoiding feelings. But face the discomfort because it is uncomfortable. If you haven't faced a trauma in 30 years and you want to walk through it, I would say make sure you don't do it alone.
Yeah.
So once you have that idea of where's my better self, how can I have the best relationships? How have I coped with dissatisfaction and making it okay in my life?
Mhm.
And that can, and also ask yourself, because we can mask all this with achievements and we can look good in the public eye. But what if that person has 5 degrees only because without that education they feel like they're worthless? So those degrees are just temporary compensation for a permanent self doubt. All the accolades is temporary compensation for
Mm.
permanent doubt.
Temporary compensation for permanent self
Yeah,
doubt.
because it don't last for so long. I don't need 300 pair of shoes. Give me 5. I'm good. So for me, my value comes from who I know I am when I wake up in the morning,
Yeah.
and who I know I want to be in front of you as best as I can. But I make mistakes. So for me, my joy comes from what am I doing? Now, yes, when I dress up, I look good, but I don't need that. I don't need a lot of things, because the things don't make me. So, and that's where we start. It's like we want a better quality of life. But that doesn't mean, but it could mean financially. Because what if that trauma has put you in a position where you're volatile and you always lose jobs because you're triggered, so you don't know how to deal with one-on-one types of confrontations. You think everything that they're saying to you, which could be used as critique to better yourself at the job, you take it as an insult because for you, it's triggering.
Yeah.
So your coping skills are off. And so, yes, it could be that you don't have good, healthy relationships and you call yourself a loner because you think that's how you are. No, baby, you're a loner because you feel safe being by yourself. But as humans, babies will die without a human connection. So what makes you think you're not dying on the inside without personal, satisfactory social connection? Your
Wow.
brain, but because your brain will secrete happy hormones when you have great connections and family and friends. You're having a good time at the bar, or you're at happy hour, or you're at homecoming with your frat brothers. Your brain knows that. Your brain knows it feels good, so it releases things in your body so you can feel that joy. But if you're a loner, you have less chances of feeling that joy. Yeah.
Donzale?
You said deep and okay. You got the shovel out and everything. I love it though. This is
Yeah,
very good information.
yeah, yeah. And so, as because you bring up a great point. So part of that is sometimes we need other people around us to not
Yeah.
necessarily. Yeah, we need other people around us to sometimes walk through that journey of overcoming or conquering, because
Yeah.
there are things that we have become accustomed to that, like you
Mhm.
said, I'm saying I'm a loner when really it could be that I just don't do well with relationships because of something that happened to me.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And think about this, one of the easiest protective factors when we talk about healing, or even when you experience a traumatic event and you have a great social connection, a social support system that can lessen that can even lessen the whole duration of that experience for you, because you have someone that makes you feel seen. You have someone to talk, tell these feelings to. You have someone that makes you feel like those feelings matter, and they sponsor you, they check on you, they make sure you're good. If not, they will stand in for you. But without that, you you are cycling these thoughts over and over again by yourself, because there's no other perspective.
Mm.
There's no release. So as we
Mhm.
talk, it's ventilation. As we talk, we know someone else holds a part of that for us, so we don't have to hold it by ourselves.
Yeah.
And so these are things, and this is why family and the way families operate are so important for children, because we are the first models of those social connections. So if mom
Mm.
and dad are not as cohesive with the child, if the siblings have a bad relationship, all of this other stuff, it kind of makes the child believe I'm a loner, because in the family structure, I didn't do well. So if the family is modeling the outside world, why would I think to go and have adult relationships?
Mhm.
That's how we think about those relationships. I was in the car today, I was talking about my kids, and I said, I told my kids at some point, and they were much younger, I said, I'm going to love you so well that when you decide to leave my house, you will not pick anyone who doesn't treat you as stellar as I do. That means even in discipline, I'm going to love you so well. I'm not going to spoil you, but I'm going to love you so well, because love is corrective, that you're not going to settle. So now my kids are very choosy in who they bring home, choosy on who they call friends, because I chose to be that quality, and it drove me to be my best self. So I had to hold myself accountable, because I knew I was inflicting things on my children, because I missed out on a lot of my childhood. I moved 8 times with different people while being abused, while being abandoned, while being picked on, all these things. I didn't. So I was a loner. I thought I was. Now I say I just don't like being out all the time. So that's a different story, right?
Yeah.
Because I'm a nice guy. I just don't want to be out because I have a family. But this is how these easy things, when we talk about what we bring into childhood, that usually comes from our family settings, our environmental settings. That's why we're talking about this now, because it may not even be trauma. It may just be the inflections of all the influences we had growing up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good. Well, Dazla, you have a final question before we have to end today's show?
No.
Okay. Well, I do. I'm going to ask this last question, and if we can just share, what are 4 things somebody says, I'm ready to
Mm-hmm.
deal with this
Mm-hmm.
childhood trauma. I'm ready to finally come to the point where I can live.
Mm-hmm.
I can set myself free and go after the things that I know I want to go after in life, but I just haven't dealt with this. What are those maybe 3 or 4 concise things that you would recommend that they do this year in 2023 to kind of start releasing themselves from that?
Well, I think it's about doing and preparing. So the first thing I'll say is just making that decision alone. That's the start. That doesn't mean you start the next day. That just means that you've started that muscle. So we'll take that off the 4 list. So we still have 4 options. The first thing is to prepare for discomfort. You become comfortable in living with it. Now you got to be comfortable with exposing it, at least to yourself, and deciding that life without it is the best life you want. That's the first thing. Second, I would say be prepared for some losses and gains, losses
Mm.
in friendships and connections, because we tend to connect with people with them how they are. If you change, there is a liability that some people won't be along for the ride, because that's not who they signed up for. You know,
Mm.
and it'll hurt. It'll hurt. It could be friends and family, but you have to be your top priority.
Yeah.
And it may not even be because they don't love you. It's because you don't fit the paradigm. But everything that tree shakes off loose, unless that limb is broken, those leaves are going to grow, and you're going to actually see more of what you should be attracting, because we attract a lot, but because of certain things we don't see all the options. So now you see new options. So fill that tree back up again with some new stuff that will support this version of you. That's number 2. Number 3, if you find it difficult to work through it alone or with friends, do not hesitate to look up a professional that you feel that you can trust. And when I say that, The first session, if it doesn't go well, you can try somebody else. It's like Tylenol. If you don't want no Midol, try some Tylenol. Try something because it's about a personal fit. Just because I know what I'm doing doesn't mean I fit for you, Marquis. You may find that it's just not the right rhythm, and that's fair. I will always tell clients, pick who you need to, even if it's not me. I just want the best for you. And lastly, I want you to always keep in mind that the burden of not healing will never outweigh the joy of living the fullest life. It never will. Because you learn to love freely because you're not afraid of love. You're just afraid of folks who won't appreciate it though. See me, I'm gonna love you, full throttle. If I find you don't appreciate it, that doesn't knock what I've done for you. That just knocks that you're not ready to receive that.
Yeah.
And that's what it is. It's like you have to be committed to your next level. And you have to go against anybody that says anything else. Oh, and last I need to throw this in because this is what clients are stuck on. Be prepared to learn to unlearn almost everything you thought you knew. From the influences from grandma, from your dad, from the hood, the projects, even college, your frat sisters, and be ready to unearth the things that you were supposed to know. Because we get scared of things like how you tell me that what mama said was wrong. I'll tell you, it wasn't good. Now you get to choose what you do with that information. I've told you, and I've shown you through example why this did not benefit you. If you want to throw it away, now let's replace that with an alternative way of seeing that. So yes, you will be uncomfortable. I will probably piss you off in a session. I do it all the time, and I love it because that means I'm going up against something. Like I'm challenging that wall.
Yeah.
And as soon as it comes down, I know. Then it's like, okay, I got you. So, yeah.
Well, this has been, I think, a very good episode, a great conversation, just to sit and listen to some of the things that you are sharing as well. And I know that you have a very engaged audience on social media. I see on Facebook and Instagram. And so share with people how they can continue to follow you and get in contact with you.
So my name is Cory George. It's two first names. And you only have to type Cory George. That's my name. But my moniker or my screen names and all of my social media is Cory George Cares, because that's how I live my life. So that's the word for me, is I care about what I do, and I care about how what I do affects you as well.
Well, thanks again for joining us. I think we'll have to have continuing conversation. I know I told you last night that, maybe we should do some lives on Instagram and continue the conversation.
There was so much. Even with the field I do, there are so many different avenues to go that we can always have a conversation. And one of my mantras or one of my goals is to make those uncomfortable conversations more palatable. The only way we do that is to have them and show them. And now we have social media to show them in larger numbers and make people question, am I talking about this at home? Yeah. Is this how I'm talking to my kids? Is this how I'm allowing myself to be treated by someone else?
And be able to take questions. So, Cory, thank you so much for joining us for the MPower Show, our very fourth week of the month, health-related topic, and it was a heavy one.
And you said that without being stuck. I was waiting. I was like, please let him get through the fourth week thing.
Yes. So we always like to end our show with words of inspiration from Donzale and I. And so Donzale, since this was one that you seem to be a little quiet today, we're going to let you go first.
I was listening.
Your inspirational word.
Yeah, so I had looked up something earlier, and it kind of had me thinking, and it kind of fits a little bit. This one is: free yourself from people who cause you drama and poison your soul. You know who they are. So as you're starting on your own walk and thinking about the things that he talked about today, think about who, like he said, who might be falling off those branches, and just be okay with that.
Yeah. And my inspirational word today will be: don't be afraid to tackle the hard topics, the hard conversations, the things that may make you a little fidgety, because these are conversations that need to be had. These are opportunities for you to really set yourself free. I'm not just speaking to you, I'm speaking to myself as well, that if you're feeling fidgety, if you're feeling anxious about the conversation, it's probably something you need to handle and you need to deal with. And that's why I thought this would be a great topic for today. So, this has been another great episode. We appreciate you joining us for the MPower Show. Please hit that subscribe button. Let us know what you think about these episodes and become a part of the family, as well as click the link in the post. And if you're not on our newsletter, join our newsletter. Here pretty soon, we're going to have a text family as well, where you can text the word MPower and join the text community so that you get notifications of events and opportunities that we have going on. But we're always excited to be sharing with you some valuable content and bringing you great guests each and every week. And if we don't have a guest, you have great hosts of the show that we bring to you each and every week. But until next time, you know what I'm about to say. Always shoot for the top because it's the bottom that's overcrowded. Take care.